I'm just going to talk about some basic do's and don'ts of the shoulders. What I would say is, as he's warming up, you'll notice nothing here is emphasizing the front deltoid. Pretty much everything you do when you train, you're going to be getting a lot of activation through here. So you don't need to get too crazy with that. If you're looking to really get shoulder development, or you're lagging in shoulder development, you need to be really feeling it in this order. Back here and then through here. Because people don't realize that if you want to look really wide from any angle and have a lot of back detail and a lot of detail overall and a lot of mass to your structure and have a nice V-taper, your rear deltoid has to be really developed, then your side deltoid has to be really developed. So the majority of your shoulder emphasis really needs to be in those two areas, because if you overwork your front deltoid, you're screwed. You're going to have a bench injury, and it's going to impede your back development as you're doing lat pull downs. So don't overwork that front deltoid. That's like the stupidest thing you can do. Just some kind of stuff to keep in mind with upright rows. I personally never did much with upright rows because I had crappy wrists. So it's an exercise, if you can feel it properly, then by all means do it. It's a great shoulder and trap exercise, but if you can't do something, don't do it. Every time I would do it, I'd feel it funny in my shoulders and my wrists would pop. And that would create irritations, and I wouldn't be able to bench and do shoulder presses properly. So listen to your body. If you can do upright rows, great. Once again, it's a really great exercise to build density and additional thickness. You can also build a lot of detail by doing more high reps with it and changing your cadence as far as the rep sequence. So not one to sleep on for sure.
I didn't really do too much for upright rows as well. As Tony said, my wrist really didn't care for them. The only way I could do them is how Paul was initially doing it, through a wider grip. So where he comes to the top of the movement, there's a 90-degree angle in the elbow. They are very effective for kind of capping out, and I use them as a finisher more than anything than a mass builder. It is a good movement, though. You just got to be very careful as to how much weight you do utilize, and really go for a pump and a feel rather than to go for a bunch of weight.
I'd say the worst ego lifting section is fucking shoulders.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the times that I have injured myself were actually on upright rows, where I would try to yank up 135 and 225. And I remember basically separating the ulnar radius within my wrist. And it took a good 6 months to a year to actually fully recover from that, and I was constantly wrapped up. So I would definitely advise away from doing anything too heavy, and make sure your grip is a good width away, so that you're not coming in close and causing a lot of strain to the wrist.
One thing you'll want to do, and definitely any body part you're training, is you need to make sure you have some sort of unilateral training in there, meaning you should always be putting some sort of priority on training each muscle group with one arm at a time or one leg at a time. By doing this is how you prevent yourself from having imbalances, both visually and as far as actually in your strength, which is going to prevent injuries and also make your aesthetics a lot better as well. So please make sure with any time you train, one of your exercises minimum, back maybe 2 exercises, you're doing something where you're doing one side at a time, all right? There's another benefit of that. If you train by yourself and you're trying to keep your intensity up and you don't have a spotter for whatever reason, or someone you can trust, on a lot of exercises, you can use that free arm to do stuff for you. So even though Paul's doing this exercise here, I'll use an easy example. Let's pretend you're doing something like well, we're getting to triceps here in a bit, but let's pretend you're doing something like a side lateral raise, okay? With your free arm, you can actually come to this point here at your wrist where the tension point's highest. As you hit that failure point, you can take that wrist and help guide yourself up for an additional 2 or 3 reps. So do that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that's going to build size and density, and it's going to build veins that come across your muscles. You need to make the muscles thick. And the only way the muscle can be thick is you need to use a lot of weight relative to what you can lift, and you need to go beyond failure with it, all right? Partial reps and doing, this kind of stuff is great, but that's just one kind of way to go to failure. You still have to be able to go beyond that with some sort of spotting. So you don't have a spotter, use one arm at a time and do it on your own like that, and it'll work. All right, now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna spot him here on the side laterals. Another easy way to get more mass out of typically an isolation exercise, if you will. So you get a sip of water, and because he's getting that sip of water, we're gonna really take this one beyond failure, really confuse his muscle fibers. So stay upright on these. Key with it when you spot someone with these is you gotta really get under their elbows. Forward just a little bit for me. All right, let's roll. All right, natural failure first. Come on, way more. You got way more in you. Come on. Keep going. This is going to take a while. Let's go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Now. Up. Good. Hold.
And what Tony is doing here is really aiding and taking him to failure, which is ultimately really going to ramp up his metabolism, increase the pump to levels that he has not yet experienced. Somebody training you can push you, can really push you to levels that you never thought were possible. It really does actually make a difference when somebody's there to fucking push you. Let's go, Paul, let's go. You'd be surprised what you can do. You have no idea what you're capable of until you push yourself. Yeah. Yeah, buddy. Now that's how you grow. That's how you grow. You should be like that after every fucking set, in my opinion. That's how I was. That's how you create freaks.
All right, so what Paul's going to be doing here is he's going to be doing a seated shoulder press, and then from there he's going to be supersetting it with side laterals. So if you're doing something like that, if mass is your primary function, if you're in a bulking season as we go into that kind of stuff, you're probably better off most of the time doing one exercise at a time. But right now he's trying to get his metabolism going, he's trying to get the muscles separated as much as possible, get surface water off the body. So supersetting for him is going to allow him to still get a really good pump, but not go quite as heavy because right now his joints aren't going to have the lubrication they would have in the off season. So that's really the purpose of doing a superset, plus you're going to get the pump out of that. Now when you're leaning forward like that, especially when he's going parallel to the floor, which is not something a lot of people can do, you're not going to be as strong most of the time, but you are obviously going to be getting a lot more emphasis on the rear deltoid, which is what he's striving for. You're not going to have any engagement in the front delt, but we went over that earlier, that's not a big deal. So the objective here for him is he's using the pressing movements to basically fire up the entire shoulder, and then from there he's isolating some more on the rear deltoid so he can get that three-dimensional look from all three angles. Because you got to remember, I mean, anytime you're standing from the back, that shoulder's just as visible as it is from the side. He doesn't have to use much weight with this. We're only starting with 5 pounds. The goal is really the muscles are going to be under tension longer than they're really used to. And by doing it this way, he's going to engage multiple parts of the heads. So his entire shoulder is going to get tired by doing this. On top of this, we're going to be combining this with another exercise, which is going to continue the theme of keeping the muscle under tension more than it's used to. So normally when you train with your set and you do a set of 8, your body's used to that 22, 24 seconds of you working that muscle. So sometimes by just changing the length of each repetition, you actually get a lot more out of it because that's a variation that the body can't get accustomed to. Good. Now control it. Perfect. Nice.
This is really going to encompass all heads of the shoulder, maximize blood flow, increase that pump.
Jason, did you mess with time under tension much with
I
shoulders?
did. Everything that I did was always had some element of time under tension. Everything that I did, I was known as, you know, I guess quarter rep, right?
How much? Well, yeah. Well, how much volume did you do on shoulders?
I was always a high volume trainer, even pre-competition, and I feel as though that actually could have hurt me at points because I would just go and go and go until I was completely gassed, and I never walked around full and round, and I think that's because I was constantly depleting glycogen storages. And ultimately, I think that's what actually hurt my career more than anything, was because I was insane. I wouldn't stop. Nothing, no amount of food I could keep up with the amount of training and the intensity I was putting forth. So it was a matter of actually cutting back, I think, on the volume and actually taking days off.
How often did you train them?
That was
like your split.
Well, my body, I was training 6-7 days a week. You know, I don't remember taking days off. And like I said, ultimately, you really do need to take into consideration that your body needs time to recover. It does need days off. And sometimes it needs a week off, depending on how hard you hit a body part or how hard you hit your entire body. I would demolish legs to the point where it would have been wise that I would have taken 3-4 days off from everything just to fully recoup, because as you know, training legs taxes every other part of the body, nervous system, everything. So back to Paul here, we've got he's really just trying to do a lot of finishing type movements to maximize pump and blood flow and whatnot, and this is ultimately where you're at this far out from a show. You need to be lean enough. You know, you need to be ready at 3 weeks out to be able to step on the stage, essentially. And it's a matter of just a little bit of refining and finishing movements, almost filling the muscles back out after the 16, 12-week diet that you've been through, to where you've completely taken all the fat off of your body, and your driest within your show prep is about 2.5, 3 weeks out. So this is, you're coming in for a landing, and you got to do it just right to maintain your fullness and pop, energy. And ultimately, that's what is really going to win shows and have you looking the best you possibly can come showtime, is being as lean as possible, round, full, and healthy looking.
How long do you think the average person should train their shoulders for? You know, not even a bodybuilder, just like, hey, my shoulder workout, what's the cost?
It really depends on what they're, in between the sets and whatnot, how long they're taking in between. I would say 45 minutes to an hour. Pre-competition, 45 minutes to an hour.
Works out. But generally speaking, if you train any body part for over 50, shoulders for over 50 minutes, you're probably overdoing it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Over 45 minutes. If you can't get a good shoulder workout in 45 minutes, you're not accomplishing what you need to be accomplishing. You need to be moving, you need to be quick, and straight to the point.
Hold it out in slight rotations. Good 35 to 60 seconds of this will normally toast the entire shoulder. Yeah. When you can't do any more, just do some partials if need be. Yep, bang out 10 partials. There you go. And by training like this, you're going to burn a lot more calories because the muscle tearing that's occurring is going to be a lot deeper. So for 36 hours, he's going to burn a lot more fat. He's destroying his glycogen storage by doing it this way too. You don't get the strawberry banana? You too good for the new flavor? See, he doesn't even use a scooper, this guy. He just shoves it in his mouth right from his hand. I'm not that tough. I can't do it that way. It's a man-child right there. That's.
How much did you just take?
Now, for those of you at home, you better take it with 16 ounces of water, right? He's like 40 ounces in the last hour. So, always with water when you're training for maximum pump.
I always emphasize in my career that the majority of your arm training should center around triceps. I would 60%, if you will, because I'd say the tricep makes up about 60% of your arm, 60 to 70% of your arm. So with a good, symmetrical, aesthetically pleasing arm, the tri should make up the majority of your arm.
Did you start with this? What did you start with?
I would always start with rope, get the joints going, and then I would move on to kick. Actually, I would start with kickbacks because kickbacks really alleviate the stress and tension from your elbows.
Did you turn your wrist, or was it just
Straight back? Yeah. And I had a unique way of propping my arm up on a sit-up bench to where I didn't have to engage any ancillary muscles such as my posterior deltoids, back, lumbar, and whatnot, and I kind of rested my bicep as I was at a 90-degree angle facing the ground, and I would do my kickbacks in that fashion. So it was just a complete isolation of my tricep.
Did you go higher on the reps, or did you actually kind of go heavier?
I would start with lighter weight, go a little high,
Yep.
hit about 15 to 16, 17 reps, and then start to work my way up in terms of weight to where I would be able to kick back 70, 80 pound dumbbell.
Wow.
For sure. Yeah.
Don't do that at home.
No. Yeah. I don't know if I could do that now. I'd probably rip my tricep right off the bone, you know. But back when I was hitting it really hard, it was a whole other story. It was a matter of going as heavy as possible, but with quality, a quality movement, if you will, and for a good amount of reps. I would never want to go below 8 to 10 reps. I felt that 8 was like the absolute bare minimum.
On all your tricep
on
movements?
all movements.
All movements.
Almost all movements.
Okay.
So, especially tricep, you know, I was really looking to achieve the most amount of pump that I possibly could with the heaviest amount of weight, with good form.
Now, there's a lot of schools of thought with triceps and what you want to do, how you want to do it. There's no right or wrong. If you're someone that's really trying to get the rear part of that tricep developed, rule of thumb is, generally speaking, you'll almost want to do the opposite of Paul. You'll almost want to be straight up with your arms really tucked in closely, maybe with a camber bar or some sort of bar. You can still do it with the rope. But by being in this position, going back, for a lot of people who don't have the genetics for a great tricep for all three heads, that's a good thing to keep in mind. So depending on your triceps, this style may be good for you because you'll be able to feel it in certain spots. But if you're lagging in this area back here, for you, that may be the way. Straight up, all the way back, elbows in real tight to the body. By coming in forward like that, you're gonna move the tension points on most people. So keep that in mind.
Bread and butter of my tricep development personally was the machine dip or dip machine, seated dip. This guy really allowed you to maximize the amount of weight with the proper amount of isolated tricep tension. With this machine, you really can put on some size. I feel as though I was able to put on a lot of size in the tricep department with this guy. You're really taking a lot of the ancillary muscles out of the movement when it comes to kickbacks and all that stuff and cable type work. You're really being able to lock your body into this machine and hone in, kind of like a bench press or a shoulder press. This is like a bread and butter mass movement, if you will, for the triceps. And depending on what area of the tricep you're trying to target, that kind of determines where you position your hands, how close, where you want your elbows pointing, whether you want them more in or outwards. And this really, as I said, you can really pile on the weight and get a good pump and know that you're really building mass with this. You think of it as a pressing type movement for the tricep, other than an extension type movement. What I'm getting at is, for example, you wouldn't just do extensions for your legs in order to maximize the development and size that you're trying to achieve with your quads. You would want to prioritize your pressing, your squat, your leg pressing type movements, because that's ultimately where you can push the most amount of weight. The same thing goes for your triceps. You don't want to just emphasize or prioritize and or do only extension type work. You want to be able to do pressing type work, because that's where you're going to get the mass gains to your tricep. You got anything, Tony?
And Jason, I have a question for you, because you used to do this. I remember you would do 10 plates on this machine, 5 and 5. How can you explain to somebody, when you do that much weight, how do you not feel it in your shoulder? How would you prevent that? Because obviously,
that's a great question.
You got to get it generated. People don't realize, first you got to get it generated, but how do you not feel it in that front shoulder?
The key to keeping it out of your shoulders and chest is to stay as vertical as possible. At least it was for me. Now everybody's a little bit different. The more you start to lean in, you're going to start to engage the lower pec in your shoulder. So in order for me to really isolate the tricep, you want to position yourself as vertically as possible. And
What was your grip position? Which one did you prefer?
my grip,
most?
ultimately, I had my elbows. I was trying to keep my elbows pointed, or keep them as close to my body as possible. And I would always want to emphasize that the weight, the pressure of the weight was on the medial part of my hand. It's the same principle, if you will, as when you squat or leg press, that you want to keep the majority of the pressure on the heel of your foot and not the ball. You start to go into the ball, you're going to start to have knee problems and all other kind of issues. The same thing goes for your hand. Where you position is greatly going to influence where the pressure and tension is going to, whether in the muscle, the elbow, and you want to avoid elbow issues and your shoulders, like you were saying. So I stayed vertical as possible, kept the pressure on the medial part of my hand, and that really allowed for me to push a lot of weight and grow my triceps overnight.
When do you recommend people trying to make their triceps bigger? What exercise should they do this in their workout, and how many sets should they do?
I
You
treated
think?
my tris just like I did with my quads, and I would start with a light warm-up, if you will, with some extension work. Usually the dumbbell kickbacks, and if I felt as though, for example, pre-competition, that I need a little bit more warm-up time to get the synovial fluid and the lubrication really ramped up in the joints and within my elbows, I would do maybe some rope cable push downs, 3-4 sets. Wouldn't really try to blow my wad on those, and then I would come to the machine press and really let go.
All right. So 3 or 4 sets on this, like one working set, or do you just do heavyweight multiple sets?
I would always do a minimum of 4 sets. Usually it was 5, 6, 7. And like I told you earlier, one of my I think downfalls was that I just did too much. I really overdid it. I would go until the pump would cease. You know, for example, if I were to hit a new machine, if I wasn't getting a pump, I wouldn't even do it. I would go to the next machine. But once I started getting a pump, I would keep doing the sets until the pump stopped growing, and then I would go off to the next exercise. But that's, like I said, that's not always the way to go.
Is that why you use the intra-workout kind of things? Because you trained more sets, more volume like that.
Yeah,
so.
I was, if I were to do it again and knowing what I know now about myself and what my ultimate goals were, it was never really to get shredded and compete. I just liked training. I like training, and I like training for size. And I love the off seasons. I look forward to the off season just to be able to have intra workouts and just to be able to train 3 hours a day and continuously get a bigger and bigger pump. I was all about the pump. I just, looking back, I was like, maybe I should have never competed. Maybe I should just guest pose my entire career, because that's ultimately where I found the most joy, was just training, volume training, and size.